Hello, welcome to SonicLAB. Here we have, finally, you can see the little box of boutiques there. Yes, we've got the boutiques. First one we're going to look at is the JU-06, which is actually modelled on the Juno 106, which I have here also. This one is very poorly though, so it's quite crackly and very temperamental, so I'm hoping I can get some comparisons without it sounding too dodgy. Nice and solid build. That's the one thing that I did notice. It feels quite hefty. There's a decent amount of weight to it. Obviously, well, some of the main concerns with this are the size of these faders, because the faders are indeed small. There's no denying it. In fact, I think these are 30mm on this one, which is the larger faders. The JP-08 has smaller faders, but they have got nice little red LEDs on top of them. We've also got these little backlit buttons to give you the same indication of whether they're on or not, rather than little LEDs. Basically, the architecture is exactly the same. The only real difference is the high-pass filter. On the Juno 106, it was a 4-position switch, whereas this is continuously variable. We've got the same filter, we've got the same single DCO and subwave, single LFO, VCA, envelope, and the thing that really gets people excited about the Juno is the chorus, because the chorus in the Juno is something very special. It's got a certain sound to it that really widens up a lot of the sounds that this synth is capable of. What I've actually tried to do here, the purpose of this review is rather than review the synth, because I mean a lot of you will already know the Juno 106. If you don't, quick recap, 6-voice, DCO-based polysynth. That's basically it. This is the same thing, but this guy uses the analog circuit behavior, which is in the IRO range, very similar to the plug-outs, I guess, that were on the System 1. So it's basically DSP code in custom hardware that fit the needs for this particular synth. These are also only 4-voice, so you only get 4-voice polyphony. That's your lot. So I flip it over. Just before we get to that, well, if I just come back to this shot here, the back is quite sort of plastic. The top is metal aluminium. We've got a little speaker. We've got a little battery compartment which takes 4 AA's. Oops. And these things also come with an optional, if I can just put that back in there, an optional case that you can pop your unit into. It's a keyboard case. I'll be honest, it does feel a bit flimsy and it seems a bit gimmicky to me. It's a 2-octave keyboard with a ribbon controller that you slot into this slot here and you mount it in, and it can either sit flat or upright like that. Speaking of which, let's look at the connections. So we'll start at this end. We've got power on and off. Power is only via mini USB. The master volume is also on one of these little mini pots here. This USB also handles MIDI and audio. You get 2 channels of audio. We've got a phone's output, mini jack output stereo, unfortunately, and a input, which is for daisy chaining them together. It doesn't process the audio, it just means that you can run one into the other. One thing I will say, you don't get this lead with it or a power supply. So you do get 4 batteries though. So how does it sound? Let's see if we can get the Juno 106 alive and see if we can get some patches together. So the first patch I've got here is just a very simple sawtooth brass. Let's see if we can get the same thing to happen on the 106. You can hear it's crackling like crazy, but you should be able to see there's a little frequency display down there. A little bit quieter. But now let's bring the chorus in. So let's see if we can get these two to play along. This is on chorus 1. It's going to crackle a bit because this is very poorly. See if I can get, let's try chorus 2. Some of these voices are a little bit quieter. I think basically the voice controller is shot on this, but you can hear that it's pretty much bang on. I would say that the 106 has a little bit more low, but it's marginal. I mean, these speakers are very bass heavy in here, but you know, I wouldn't expect it to be absolutely perfect, but the texture and the chorus and the quality of the oscillator, apart from that very lowness, is actually not bad. Let's try some more patches. So this one is a sound that I used to use when I was using the 106 for various remixes and what have you. Got the filter happening on the pitch bend wheel of the Juno 106, which is kind of major part of the performance aspect of this instrument. Now if I go to the same sound on the JU-06, got the same, I've got a bit of reverb on this because it just livens it up a bit. Now, the character is very slightly different, and bear in mind I've had to program this by ear. But the really big difference is I can't actually assign the pitch bend to the filter. On the JU-06, I've just got pitch bend and mod. This actually might not seem like a big thing, but very much part of the performance aspect of the 106 was the ability to be able to put the mod wheel to the filter and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, maybe what we can do with this is then, you know, I could just assign these. These are going to be MIDI controllers, right? So I could just assign a MIDI controller and it'll all be good. So I could do it from an external source. This is actually not the case. This is something that is quite surprising. You can only receive MIDI and also modulation and control information. There doesn't seem to be any other, I think perhaps volume as well. The faders themselves do not operate in CC mode. The only way to get them to output data is to put the unit in chain mode, which is when you chain maybe 2 of these units together to have voice overflow for 2 JU-06s for 8 voices, and then the output system exclusive. And this only also goes out of the MIDI DIN, so you can't plug it into your host computer and have it as the hub and then start to maybe use larger format controllers to control some of these little aspects, but also, more importantly, to some of the control aspects. It's similar also with portamento. To get portamento on the go, which was just a switch and a knob on the original, what you have to do is you press this button here, which is the button chorus 2, and that switches portamento, and that switches portamento time. It's a kind of multi-faceted operation, which means the performance aspect on this synth, and I think on the others as well, is somewhat overlooked, or it's something that they haven't actually focused on. And I think that's kind of a bit of a shame. This sound is the classic kind of sonorous, chorusy pad using chorus 1. You get that really beautiful, wide, it's a very authentic chorus actually. If you turn it up really loud, you can hear the noise, the same noise that you get on this guy. So, you know, they've obviously modelled it very effectively. Let's see if we can get this old lady to play ball this time as well. I'm playing both of these together. I'll cut it there because you got that awful noise. I'm terribly sorry about that. It's just sick and I haven't had the chance to get the voices fixed. But to my ears, very, very similar. Really, actually impressively similar. Let's flip through a few patches. Just before we do, the way that this works is left-hand side is the bank, right-hand side is the program number. So we've got 64 patches, 8 banks of 8. There's our brass. Oops. More sort of paddy sounds. Does have that kind of appealing analog sound. Let's flip chorus 2 on instead, which is a bit more movement. Let's get that right down. It's got a good range. Here's a sort of organy sound, lots of clicky organs that this was used for. using chorus 2. Again, it's pretty hard to get the exact harmonics to match on the filter and the resonance, but that to me sounds very, very close, and particularly with the chorus, again, we've got that kind of nice wide spread. Again, you know, close. So let's just take this little sound here, which is that kind of bell-like chorused sort of sound that the Juno does really well. Just tinker with this a little bit. What this actually is the filter, the resonance on the filter. As soon as I switch the waves in, it changes. So if I bring a bit of noise in, sounds really lovely. Now let's try a bit of sub. We get some really interesting harmonics. And the other thing that we can do here is we can add some delay, because we've got a delay built in. So to do that, first of all, you press the manual button, then you've got all these different parameters. The delay parameters are the top 3, which is 14, 15, 16. 14 is the delay level, so we'll bring that up here. 15 is the delay time, which is quite high. And 16 is the delay feedback. So now, I've got the delay going on. Particularly nice when I start tinkering with the sub level. Anyway, it's easy to get lost. I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is it's quite straightforward to get into that kind of esoteric world that the Juno 106 can do as well. Albeit with the shorter faders, it's harder sometimes to find that sweet spot, but it's nonetheless, it is possible. If I want to save this patch now, it's a really simple matter. I'm in bank 58, I'm going to press and hold, and now that's stored. Nice and simple. Keep that one. So let's just get back into some basics. The filter, let's just listen to, this is a sawtooth with a sweep, say half resonance. You get that nice sing-song harmonic. And as I say, it can go into self-resonance. Let's just take a listen to a saw pulse width, because obviously everybody loves pulse width. Add a bit of sub to that. Sounding pretty Juno to me, I have to say. I mean, that is, you know, raw waves. The sound of the Juno filter has there's a certain specific harmonic characteristic which is a bit different. It's almost got a kind of vowel-y flavour to it, particularly noticed in summer patches. Get this sort of specific sound, and it's working for me. Right, there's one more thing to look at, and that's the sequencer. Actually, before we do that, we should take a look at the various different modes. On the original 106, you just had poly 1 and poly 2, which if you press them together, you got this kind of weird sort of unison, slightly metallic. Let's see what we got here. So pressing the chorus 2 button, we're in poly mode. We can go into solo mode, which is last note monophonic mode. And finally, there's also unison mode, which gets that kind of slightly synced metallic edge to all of those oscillators synced up. You can't detune it or anything, you know, that's just the sound you get, and that sounds very similar to the sound that you get on the 106 when you press and hold Poly 1 and Poly 2 together. I don't think that was ever actually supposed to be a thing, but it was something that you kind of found that you could do. So, sequencer mode. To get into sequencer mode, you press and hold these last two buttons and you get a row of 16 kind of classic step type things. Let's see what this sequence is playing. We can switch on and off steps, as you would expect with a normal sequencer. Also, if we press and hold button 2, this controls the tempo and this controls the overall gate length. We stop the sequencer a second. What we can actually do for each of these steps, I can actually just program in each step. So press and hold, play a note. And now I can program in simply like that. We can change the behavior of the sequence so that switching the step off either becomes a rest or a tie. So you have a little bit of control over it. You can store each sequence by pressing and holding 2 and pressing and holding the slot that you want the sequence to be stored in. These are global, they're not per patch. Another neat feature is with each step I can change the gate length. So if I just bring all those down and then, so you can hear I can use it to kind of create, you know, reasonable amount of movement in each of the sequences. You know, it's basic, you can't chain patterns together. I can't figure out a way, if there's a way to trigger sequences via external MIDI, so you couldn't chain them up in any other way. It's really more of quite a simple but, you know, useful to have sequencer nonetheless. And if you're playing the sequence, you can still, if you're in poly mode, play notes over the top of it, so you can use it as a sort of accompaniment type thing. The MIDI implementation, as I say, is quite basic. We get a single port in and out, which is a replication of the USB MIDI, and the audio, like I said, is just 2-channel. That's 44.1. 16-bit. So really, I think they've actually done a pretty good job of matching the kind of spirit of the 106, and the sonic imprint is actually very close. They've got the chorus pretty much bang on, and that's one of the big parts of this. Yeah, there are slight discrepancies. You've got a little bit more bottom end on the real thing, but that could be down to, you know, a number of things. Obviously, this is quite an old lady and a bit broken, so the match is not going to be perfect. It does sound a bit more fulsome also from memory as well. I think the only thing that I'm a bit disappointed about is that the fact that they haven't really addressed the performance aspects of the 106 or any of the other synthesizers in this particular boutique range, where we could use the pitch and mod wheel to control things like filter, because to try and do that via the panel and return it to the point it was where you started the patch on a fader this size is actually pretty microscopically difficult. And I'm thinking really, you know, it would be nice to be able to have a CC mode where we could send in MIDI controllers to control some of these parameters. I mean, that little bit of tweaking I was doing with the sub oscillator on the earlier patch would have been really nice to be able to do that via MIDI controller as well, but that's just not the case. I guess it might be possible in the future. Obviously, it's only 4-voice, so it's not exactly the same as a Juno 106, but I think on the whole, they've done a really good job of modelling it, and you get pretty much the sound of the 106, warts and all, with the noisy chorus too. So I think it's going to be pretty hard for them not to sell a load of these. I know these are supposed to be limited edition. In fact, I think they're just going to be making them up to a certain fixed point and will make as many as they can depending on demand. So the price is £229 UK, $299 US. The KM25 additional keyboard is 75 quid. I think it's about 125 US dollars if you want one. I think if you want a Juno sound and you're not prepared to pay whatever the astronomical cost of a second-hand one is, and 4-voice is fine, then this could be the baby for you. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed this review, please subscribe. There will be other reviews along shortly. See you next time.